Joining us now is Ben Carson, the United States Secretary of Housing and Urban Development in the Trump administration. As you know, Dr. Carson ran for the Republican nomination for president. I remember him at several of the early debates I covered, the first being in Cleveland. Had a chance to chat with him there. One of the nicest men you'll ever meet. And, of course, you know his history as a doctor. But he's doing some great things at HUD, and he is joining us now. Dr. Carson, great to have you back on the John Fredericks Radio Network, sir.
Hey, great to be with you again and to be able to announce something so wonderful. You know, there are a lot of parts of my job that I don't like very much, but this is one that I really like, that we're going to be able to announce $60 million to Virginia, $30 million to Newport News, and $30 million to Norfolk through the Choice Neighborhood Grant Program. And, you know, this is a fantastic program in which we replace distressed properties with top-quality mixed-income housing, where we basically give families connections with employment, health, education, and where we create an environment that attracts other investments. So, for instance, in Newport News, the $30 million that they are receiving has generated an additional $275.3 million. So basically, for every HUD dollar, you're getting $9.17 of additional dollars generated. For the Marshall Ridley neighborhood, we'll see $305.3 million in new investment. So that's an amazing thing. And in Norfolk, $30 million also, which is attracting an additional $158.3 million. So the St. Paul area will see $188.3 million in new investment. These are the kinds of things that really spur a lot of activity around them, and it's a win-win for everybody.
Dr. Carson, what is the genesis of the new investment, the $9.17 per U.S. HUD dollar? Where is that being generated from, sir?
Some of it comes from the state and the local authorities, and a lot of it comes from nonprofits and private capital.
So as we look at the $60 million in this particular area of distressed Hampton Roads, Norfolk, and Newport News, I know you've also got one going on in Omaha. But what is give us the big picture, and then we'll drill down, Mr. Secretary. What's your big vision here of these?
Well, the big vision is helping people to realize that it's just not the federal government. It's the federal government, state government, and the local government working together with the private sector that results in the maintenance and the flourishing of our communities. And we have got to recognize that and remember that if we're ever going to be able to solve the multitudinous problems that plague many of our cities.
You're on the John Fredericks Radio Network. We are with Dr. Ben Carson, United States Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, and they are rolling out today the fiscal year 2018 Choice Neighborhoods Implementation Grant, $60 million going to Virginia, $30 million in Newport News, $30 million in the Norfolk area. Dr. Carson, you talked about the big picture. Let's get it down to individuals that live in these distressed areas, individual residents. How does it help them? What does it mean to them?
Well, what we like to do is hook up the individual residents with opportunities. We have technical assistance, and there are people to help them with the educational facilities that are nearby, trying to bring a lot of the resources that exist in different places all under one roof so that people can actually have access to them. You know, it's particularly important if you're a working individual, maybe you're working at a low-wage job, and you don't have a lot of free time to go to 17 different places to find out what's available for you. trying to bring those things into a consolidated area is a tremendous help for people. And also looking at ways that we can holistically support those communities. So when these communities are built, we're also making sure that grocery stores are there. We're making sure that training facilities are there. We're working with the schools in the system. We're working with the healthcare system to make healthcare available to them. So a lot of things become available to people that normally are not.
Mr. Secretary, I know from your history that you're a big believer in measuring success and accountability. You certainly said that during the campaign, and I did read your book also. And having known what you've been through in your own life, sir, how do you measure success here? What are the touch points, if you will, to say, okay, in these two areas, Newport News and Norfolk, Virginia specifically, here's the investment we made, here was the total money we got, and here was the result. How do you measure success?
Well, for a very long time, HUD has measured success by the number of people that we have in various programs and the number of people that we're able to house. Now we measure success by the number of people that we're able to get out of dependency and to become self-sufficient. And that obviously is something that benefits not only the individual but society as a whole, because each time you get somebody out of dependency, that's one less person you have to support, and at the same time, one more productive member of society who's contributing.
I remember back during the Reagan administration, during the George H. Bush administration, when my good friend Jack Kemp was director of HUD, and he rolled out, and I'm going from memory here, Mr. Secretary, he wrote out opportunity zones.
Enterprise zones.
Enterprise zones. Thank you, sir. What's different? What's the same?
Okay. Well, what's the same is that, you're trying to empower people. What's different is that with the opportunity zones, it's long-term. With some of the programs that have been envisioned in the past, people would come in, reap a benefit, and leave. But you have to leave your unrealized capital gain investment in an opportunity zone for 5 years before you get the first real benefit, which is a 10% decrement in the amount of capital gains you owed on the original investment. That goes up to 15% if you leave it in for 7 years. And if you leave it in for 10 years, you don't have to pay any capital gains on the new money that was gained. That's a significant inducement. But the most important thing is if you're investing money long-term like that, you're not just going to put the money in and walk away. You're going to be very interested in your return on investment. So you're going to be interested in the development of those areas, and that's the real big difference.
So if I'm right now, if I'm a family and I'm living in public housing in this section, sir, of Newport News, and I want to get specific here so people can get the example. I've got a family of 3. I'm a single mom, let's say. I've got 3 children, family of 4, and I'm living in public housing in this section of Newport News. Things are downtrodden. What will change for me?
Well, one of the things that's going to change is a lot of the public housing that is there now is either going to be revamped or replaced with mixed income housing, which is beautiful. No one will be able to tell who's being subsidized and who's not being subsidized. And because you have private sector involvement, you have continued interest. The way public housing used to work is the government would build this big monstrosity and walk away and leave it to deteriorate with no one really paying attention. That you will see vanish. You will also see a lot more attention to the schools that your children are going to, programs in those schools, including health screening and ways to take care of chronic illnesses that exist in the community.
So basically, if I'm that single mom now making $10 an hour, working 2 jobs, and I'm in a public housing, I can now qualify to live in this other housing. I'm going to get a subsidy, obviously, from HUD and others. So that's going to be subsidized. But living right 2 doors down from me could be somebody making $150,000, an executive, single, whatever, that is in this new development. So you really can't tell between it, which would then take that family and uplift them perhaps out of poverty.
Yes, not only that, but also we would be looking for ways for that mom to be able to put her children in a safe place in terms of child care so that she can go back and get her GED or her associate's degree or her bachelor's degree and really become independent and teach that to her children.
Now, Mr. Secretary, you've got a couple of pilot programs here. What is your long-term vision for rolling this out throughout the United States?
Well, that's the whole purpose of the opportunity zones. Opportunity zones are like choice neighborhood grants on steroids. There's 8,761 opportunity zones throughout the entire country, and when you look at unrealized capital gains, you're talking about $2.3 trillion over the last few years, with the potential to be invested into these places. Win-win situations. That's what we're talking about. That's the kind of thing that will really cause our nation to flourish. Instead of, what we see a lot of is just, partisan politics and hatred and resistance, and if you say it's black, I say it's white. You say it's tall, I say it's short. This is just craziness. And, we need to be doing things which will show people that they're not victims, that we're willing to reach out, we're willing to help people to become self-sustaining, self-sufficient. And if we all work together, think of all the good that can be done.
You're on the John Fredericks Radio Network and the John Fredericks app. We're with Dr. Ben Carson, the United States Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. Doctor, Mr. Secretary, we've only got a couple more minutes. Since becoming the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, part of the President's cabinet, going there every day, what is one of your biggest frustrations in that job?
Bureaucracy. Bureaucrats are people who think that the rules are more important than the goals. And, coming from a surgical background, I'm just the opposite. I'm just like, what are we trying to achieve here? And how do we get it done? And how do we get it done quickly and effectively before the patient dies? So, that's obviously coming at me from a very different angle. But, I'm working with it, and we're learning how to move this agency from a gigantic bureaucracy to act more like a business. There was no CFO when I got here. Hadn't been one for 8 years. With the billions of dollars that are flowing through here, we now have one, are putting financial controls in place, and running the place in a much more responsible way.
How have you been received by the career civil workers, you call the bureaucracy, but the civil servants that have been there for a long time? They've been through, obviously, a number of secretaries. We've often heard about some of the secretaries' initiatives getting thwarted because the civil servants don't really cooperate. Have you been able to change that mindset?
Yeah, I've not found that to be the case.
Really?
I was certainly told that would be the case. But, we've been working with the careers from the beginning. I had to. When I got here, I spent the first 5 months with no assistant secretaries and no deputy secretary.
My goodness.
I had to rely on careers working with them. But I would have done that anyway, because they have a wealth of information. And once they realize what we're trying to do is get people out of poverty, and that really shouldn't be a partisan issue. And they're working with us quite well.
I've got to give you a text here I got from Nick in Virginia Beach. He says, please, John, please tell Dr. Carson, Secretary Carson, that Liberty University loves and respects him. He was out at commencement on Saturday. I didn't attend, even though my wife and I both earned degrees from Liberty, but we saw him on the internet. So you get a big shout out there.
We had
Mr.
a good time
Secretary.
there. It was great.
All right. Final thing, when it's all said and done at HUD, Mr. Secretary, what do you want your legacy to be?
Well, I'm not big on legacies. People have been asking me that for a long time, because it's really not about me. It's really about, are we going to be able to change the direction from just keeping people mired in poverty to empowering people and turning their lives around and helping the people of our nation to once again grab that can-do attitude versus the what can you do for me attitude. Those are the things that will elevate and keep our nation strong.
So, final question, Mr. Secretary. I believe the president is going to win again, only bigger. Are we going to see Secretary Ben Carson at HUD in a potential second term for President Trump?
Well, as I've said in the past, my preference is private sector. That's where I spent all my life. I would like to be there now, but I realize that this is an important thing that we're doing. And if everybody had felt that way, including the people who helped founded our country, we would never have had the country that we have. So that's basically the way I look at it.
I'll take that as a positive answer, right? Yes, you'll be there, Dr.
Yes,
Carson.
indeed.
Mr. Secretary, thank you for being with us. Dr. Ben Carson, United States Secretary of HUD, Housing and Urban Development, rolling out this great program today in Newport News and the Norfolk area. Mr. Secretary, thanks for being with us again. I really appreciate the time.
Always a pleasure.
John Fredericks Radio Network. Quick word from our sponsors. I'll be back with a wrap.